It's cold. It's cold here in Illinois, and I've had enough. All my stuff is still out. You know, the nice thing about this is that I can bring my little guy down here and I can show him some of these baits and teach him where the hooks are at so he doesn't get stabbed. What's this guy?
I'm baby.
Where's his hook?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got to hold a jig.
There's a jig. Where's his hook? Yeah.
But that's the weed guard.
That's the weed guard, yeah. Probably make some people cringe. That's dangerous. Oh, tetanus. Oh, that little kid's gonna stick his finger. That little kid's gonna stick his finger and get tetanus. Oh. He's fine. He's a tough kid. We're learning about things that hurt so that we can avoid them. This guy came home on my shoe one time. This is his favorite frog. He likes to point out the hooks and give it a kiss.
Hey, little pumpkin.
Yeah, where's his hooks? Pond fishing is one of the best ways to get started with fishing, but it's also one of the easiest things to forget if you've been fishing for a while. I think that once we start going to bigger lakes and bigger bodies of water, we forget how much fun it is to just get out to a pond and work a shoreline. Not bring a boat, not have a bunch of equipment, but just go out and work a shoreline.
Cause we gonna put this on YouTube. Hey, go get my minnow trap. Got me minnow. Go eat it.
Chances are there's some good ponds near you. So if you are a veteran fisherman and you've forgotten about them, I'd invite you to revisit those places. And if you're new to fishing, stick around, this is gonna be helpful. You know, I did a video a couple years back where I was talking about fishing for bullhead in a pond. It's really simple. You know, you need a bobber, a hook, some bait, and some patience, and you can catch some fish. This year I wanted to get a little more active, and I wanted to go after some fish that were gonna strike some things that were a little more enjoyable to fish than just a bobber. So like I mentioned in the last video, when we got back from vacation this year, I started looking around for ponds that were nearby that I could fish, because I was pretty much at a point where, you know, my dad's boat was put away, my boat never came out this year, it's just a little John boat, but I just never got it out. And so I was looking for a place that I could get out with the kids and catch some fish, and so I started to look for ponds. Well, in the past, when I had fished tournaments, when I had fished creeks and rivers and lakes, I was what you would call kind of a maximalist. I would take everything. I would take every bait, I would take every color, I would take multiple bags and multiple tackle boxes, tons of rods, and then I would get on the water and I would spend more time adjusting presentations, swapping these guys out for these guys and changing colors and tying and retying, and then I would actually fishing. Pond fishing has kind of a special place in my heart because it was what got me to reduce a lot of the stuff that I was taking with me. I knew that I was only going to get 30 or 45 minutes to fish, maybe, with one of my kids.
There, up.
Oh, hold your boat.
Little rod tip up.
Reel. No, not the button. Reel.
Reel it in.
Push it forward. Okay, you're doing it. Go, you got one. He wants my hands off there. He's like, here, lift it up. Whoa, my God.
You caught a fish.
Holy smokes.
Good job.
Oh, whoa, look out.
Like we talked about in the last video, I was fixing my life. Everything was kind of a mess. I'm still in the process of fixing everything and reducing the amount of things that are all around me. Like you can see, my cluttered up table is still here in full force. Okay, wait for the damn sump to go off. The dungeon. This is the freaking dungeon. I should do a tour down here. This is ridiculous. I didn't want to pick a body of water where I had to put a boat in, and 20 of the 45 minutes that we would have to fish would be spent, you know, me swearing at the trailer and trying to line the thing up and getting frustrated. The good news was that I found a place. The bad news was that I didn't have any idea how to fish it. We're going to talk about the first 2 trips that I took to the pond, what I did wrong, and what I learned so that you can apply that to your fishing and get better faster. You guys are going to hear me saying this a lot. I strongly suggest you start a journal. I have a journal for business and I have a journal for fishing. Both of those are really useful. They allow me to go back and look at things like temperature, maybe things that I noted but I wasn't really paying attention to in the past, and see what went wrong and what went right. I'm gonna read you what I wrote the first day after I got back from the pond because I think it kind of sets the stage. September 14th, pond fishing in Illinois. Weather around 60 degrees. Got to start at 6 a.m. and left the house at 6:45. The big man was fishing from shore using a Ned rig with an exposed hook. I had a crankbait that I wanted to practice with and also a weightless wacky rigged 4-inch Ocho like we had been using in Wisconsin. Well, fun fact, the pond is super sludgy and has all sorts of muck on it and in it. I tried the crankbait about twice and found out it was impossible to use. Then we both fished the plastics we had tied on and nothing. I think I'd like to go back and try one pass with a straight topwater frog, one pass with a weightless jerkbait like a fluke and a big hook that will be able to move about medium speed, and finally one pass with either a weightless Senko or wacky worm, maybe an Ocho again or a trick worm. I do not think that the bass will hit our bait if it is buried in the muck or even inhale it off the bottom. So how can we maximize our time in the strike zone? Gotta be up somehow and not hung up, super weedless. I'd also consider a drop shot maybe, but that sounds like kind of a pain to manage. Let's try these other ones first. Now I'm gonna link to an actual blog that you can look at if you want to go over some additional notes. But there were a couple things that we learned the first day that we got out to fish the pond. First, we learned that it was a typical Illinois sludgy, mucky death bottom. And so we had come back from Wisconsin fishing Ned rigs with hula sticks for, smallmouth bass and rock bass and pretty much anything that swims.
Is he recording? Hear that drag going? Okay, don't horse him, hang on. I sound like my father. Whoa! Okay, that's good. Whoa, buddy. If he tires himself out underwater, he's not gonna fling that hook. Yeah.
I can.
Is that him?
Yep.
Okay. Yep. Move it. Let him pull drag, that's okay. That's what the drag is for. Okay, I think we're about to catch. Oh yeah! Look at that fish! Oh man, nice job. 2 missed fish, but when it counted, you got it. That's awesome. When it counted. That's not, my English is good. Oh, and our trolling motor
It's not
is
locked in place.
Rocky humps, rocky sandy shorelines with transitions into weeds where a jig can bounce along the bottom pretty freely and the fish aren't afraid to strike things off the bottom. Well, here in Illinois, once it gets buried down in that muck, it's very frustrating. And so we ended up spending more time pulling gunk off of our hooks than we did catching fish, which is not good if you're taking a youngster with you to fish. That can ruin it for them. Surprisingly, the water was reasonably clear. Sometimes in Illinois it can go one way or the other, but the water was pretty clear. There were these large pods of floating algae. Now again, if we would cast into that stuff, our exposed hook would get caught up right away. Even that Ocho rigged wacky didn't have a weed guard on it, so it was getting stuck in everything. And then I didn't know what the maximum depth was. I didn't know what the forage was. So really, day one was kind of this exploratory mission, and I should have taken it myself. I shouldn't have started with my son because I ran the risk of ruining it for him because it didn't pan out the way that we thought it would. Fortunately, there was a playground that he saw that said looked really fun, so we put the fishing poles away and we went and played on the playground and we salvaged the day. So he still had fun. If you're a parent and you take your kid out to do something and it doesn't go well, you know that stings, that hurts. You feel like you've let them down. So even though you've gone out with the best of intentions to spend this quality time together, it sucks when you feel like you let them down. I was upset about that. We came home, that's when I wrote that paragraph in my journal. And so let me tell you about the second day, because I decided that I had to go back by myself because I was pissed. I was mad that we didn't catch anything. I came back and I licked my wounds and I started to think about what could I fish there that I didn't take the first time. What were some things that I was looking at? One was the type of cover that was in the pond. So there's these big algae pads and there's all this muck on the bottom. So I knew that I wanted to fish something that was gonna work in between that area or even on top of that area, but I had no confidence in the topwater. I had never caught a fish on a traditional frog before. Or really anything else. The only time I had caught a fish on topwater was when I was using this guy right here. This is a fluke. And this is one of my favorite baits. In the past, when I've been throwing this out past algae and stuff that's up near shore, like if I'm fishing from shore, I'll cast this out and I'll work it back. Well, when I get back to that algae, I usually work it up over the top. And a lot of times it's not intentional. A lot of times it's just I want to get it up and over so that it doesn't get snagged up. But sometimes you got to kind of hop it along and bass will come up and strike it.
Oh, nice bass. Thanks, dude. You're the best.
So I had seen topwater strikes before, but I had never gone out with the intent of taking, it was actually this frog, taking a frog like this and fishing it for an extended period of time. That wasn't my intention. See, I created one of these again. This is the messy plan with a bunch of things on it. And I used to create these, instead of simplifying my approach, I would have 4, 5, 6 presentations that I thought I was gonna use in about a 1 or 2 hour period. And it never happened. And I can tell you, if you do that, it won't happen. So anyway, I go out the second day and things are a little bit different this time. And I'm gonna read my notes from the journal now from day 2. What happened? And why this kind of got me to move more in a minimalist direction. September 18th, pond fishing in Illinois. Weather around 60 degrees. Skies were clear and stable yesterday and last night. I was out the door at 6:30 a.m., made it to the pond right after 7, and was immediately able to start throwing a frog. The plan was to fish a frog for 1 lap, a toad for 1 lap, a fluke for 1 lap, weightless, and a wacky rigged ocho for 1 lap. But I never switched away from the frog. I caught a 2.5 pound largemouth back in the corner by the bridge under the algae that looks like tiny little green pieces. It's not super dense and it was only about 20 foot wide by 10 foot deep patch of cover, tucked back in the corner of the lake by calmer water. I was just looking for life, saw a heron and some small fish, and the cool thing was as the fish started to move in the shallow water, I could literally see the water bulge up on top. So I threw it 2 more times in the general area and he smacked it and pulled it under. I think I got a good hook set because the algae was so thin. Then about 30 minutes later, I missed this guy's big sister, but she was on the opposite side in a little bay, kind of across from the parking lot. I turned her after she took the frog, but the bait popped right out, and it was loaded with thick sludge. So I think what happened was when the bass hit, she took a bunch of muck as well, and I didn't get a good hook set through all that crap. Absolute heartbreak. Missed another nearby in the same stuff as well, smaller though. Then that was it. I wrapped up about 9, and there was never any reason to switch to the other baits. But it was cool to find life here and catch my first legitimate frogfish. That second fish that I mentioned, she was a dandy. Now I didn't take a camera with me this day to film. It was just me exploring a place that I got skunked in a second time. I was throwing, this is a KVD, it's a Strike King, I think they call it a sexy frog or something like that. And this is what I was using. But when that second fish took the bait, it inhaled so much snot and algae off the top of the water that when I set the hook, I didn't set it as hard as I should have, but I set the hook and I started to reel and I turned the fish. I saw the side of the fish come up out of the water, but when it turned and it dove back down, bait popped right out. This thing came up with about a pound of snot and muck stuck in it and around it. All of that got wedged in the bait, and when I set the hook, I didn't actually get the hook to penetrate the fish's mouth because all it did was stick into all that sludge. Then I had another fish hit it over in that same stuff, but it just kind of, it hit the bait and it like flew up in the air, didn't even get it in its mouth. The first fish though, I actually didn't see the strike. I heard it. And I was fishing around this green stuff and they were like these little speckled pieces of, they almost look like little tiny leaves or little tiny lily pads that are all floating around. And so when he came up, he was probably about 3 feet offshore because my bait was almost in. When he ate this though, he didn't have as much gunk to come up through. So he was able to get it in his mouth and I was able to get a good hook set because I wasn't fighting against all that snotty algae. So I wasn't paying attention to my surroundings. The only thing I was paying attention to was, I think I should go back and fish in that corner because I don't know if there's any fish in here and I see some life. There was a heron that I could see and I assumed that he was eating something in the water. So I thought, well, I can't see any life below the water. I can see some life above the water, so I'm gonna go to that. That's where I'm gonna go. This was the first of 4 or 5 baits that I was gonna tie on and use, and I used it all day at a place that I had been skunked, and I was more successful than I had been in the past, switching multiple baits, trying multiple things, run and gun, a bunch of different stuff, spend more time tying on. Fishing one bait allowed me to build a little bit of confidence with it, which was nice, and then also to catch, you know, to interact, because I only caught the one fish, to interact with more fish than I had previously. I had zero confidence in topwaters before this day. Now I use them all the time. What I should have done though, if I had it to do over again, I would have gone there with the mindset that I'm gonna use this one bait for 2 hours and focus on getting it to work the right way, getting it to look the right way, getting a feel for it so that I can build some confidence with it. The next time we go out and do that, it's probably gonna be with a square bill crankbait. It might be with a jerk bait. Probably not a rattle trap type bait, but maybe. Might even be a spinner bait. All of those are not real high on my confidence list. I'm gonna schedule trips this coming year where I just take the one bait and focus as hard as I can to really get as much out of it in the shortest amount of time. And so this second day was a success accidentally. If you take some of these things that I did wrong and some of the things that I did right and you apply them to your pond, you could have a little bit more success. And the one thing that I really wish was that my son had caught that fish and not me. But we're gonna go back this year and we're gonna try to get him a fish on a frog. And there's some other baits that I've used now in this pond that have worked, different from what we took out the first day. As we've gone back several times, we've tested other things and we've made improvements. And that's important, that each time you go that you're learning. Every time you go, you should be learning. And if you want to read a little bit more of the details about this trip, head over to the blog and check that out. But if I could leave you with 5 quick concepts to apply to your pond fishing, they would be this. If you're able to go out and explore the body of water ahead of time and look at things like cover, bottom composition, and the color of the bottom of the pond, that's gonna help you select your presentations and your baits and your colors, at least help you get a good starting point. Number 2, don't make a complicated plan. Don't do what I did. Number 2, don't make a complicated plan. Don't do what I did. Take 1, maybe 2 baits that you can dedicate some time to. And if it's a new bait that you don't have confidence in, plan on spending some time with it. When you get to the pond, if you don't know where the fish are at, look for life. Look for life above the water. Look for things that you can see if you can't see anything in the water. And just test those areas and start to work around there, just as a starting point. Number 4, this is gonna be one that we're gonna talk about more from this year. Pay attention to cues and things that are happening around you. If you're in skinny water or if you're fishing an area where the water is shallow and bass are chasing other fish, they're gonna make that water bulge on the surface. And on a nice calm morning when it's early, cast over towards that area and see if there's an active fish that's feeding. See if you can take advantage of that. Listen and see if you can hear fish eating or attacking things topwater. And if you hear something, look there quickly, and if you can get to it and cast over by it, give it a shot. But if you can't, if it's across the pond and it's somewhere where you can't reach, make a mental note of where that was at, because there's fish there. And so the next time you're over in that area, throw where he was at. Throw in the surrounding area and see if that's a spot that causes fish to congregate. Finally, number 5, just stick with it. Just get out and go and learn something new every time you're out on the water, whether you're on foot or in a boat. Have fun. Every trip is a blessing, no matter what the outcome. Don't ever forget that. Anytime you're fishing, even when you're frustrated, there's somebody that wants to be out fishing, but they can't because they got some other obligation that they got to take care of, but you're there. So even if you get skunked, enjoy everything. Enjoy the hot, the cold, the breeze, the sun, the shade, the rain, all of it. Soak it up. Because at some point, we're not going to be able to get out and go anymore. Don't take it for granted. All right, guys, that's it for today. Go explore. Go hit up some ponds. Head over to the blog. Leave a comment. If you guys got any questions, let me know. I'll try to answer them. And if this helped you in any way, hit me up on social media. I'd love to hear from you. Let's get better. See ya.